again, everyone. The Board of Commissioners have returned from executive session, which ended at 6:49 p.m. Was motioned by Commissioner King and second by Commissioner Myers. Was voted unanimously to exit out of executive session to return back to public session. Time is now 7:08 p.m. We are now at the call of order for our meeting on tonight, with the invocation being provided by Commissioner Myers. At this time, Commissioner Myers.
Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here today. Make everything we do begin with your inspiration and continue with your help. We ask for your guidance throughout this meeting, that all of our thoughts and action will relate to your holy will, and that you will grant us the grace to love you and our neighbors perfectly. Mighty God, may we briefly reflect in wisdom on our tonight meetings, use our expertise and our judgment, Lord, and direct our present. Let us be listeners more than speakers, and may we always have in mind your will for the well-being for Richland 1 School District. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Commissioner Myers, for providing our invocation on tonight. At this time, we will call for the adoption of the agenda. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bishop, second by Commissioner King. We'll open the floor for any questions or comments.
Clyburn. Oh, Clyburn.
Excuse me?
It was seconded.
Clyburn by second.
Oh, I'm
Clyburn.
sorry. Y'all know I can't have C.
It's all right.
Put the glasses on. Can't hear either. Okay, well, second either by Commissioner Clyburn. Okay, Commissioner King?
Yes, I have a quick question, Madam Chair. So when I read the minutes, which we will approve in a second, there was a motion that passed that Mr. Devine had had called for, which was for staff to monitor the situation and bring back information at the next board meeting, which is this board meeting, regarding the reopening to the public. And I don't know, it's not specified on the agenda, so
The discussion about the update, I believe that's going to be a part of the superintendent's report.
okay, well, so it wasn't specific on the agenda, which, you know, I think that it's important for us to be very transparent and know the public, so the public knows exactly what we're going to talk about, because this is a hot subject. So if it's in the superintendent's report, it's great, but it's not spelled out. And so I view that as not as transparent as it should be. So I just wanted that point to be noted. Thank you.
And I understand your concern, but it's very transparent. I think when Commissioner Devine made the motion was that the superintendent report back to the board next steps. So if he's reporting back to the board, the superintendent would be fitted for it to be in the superintendent's report. So we will get a report on that, so everyone will get that information. I think the important thing is that we asked for the information to be provided for us tonight, and it is. So let's go ahead and get the meeting rolling so we can get to that important hot topic so everyone can hear the next steps as we move forward. Okay? There is a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. We've had discussion and comments and conversation. We'll now make a request to make a vote, yea and nay, to approve the agenda. Okay, the ayes have it. Vote is 7-0. Let the record reflect all board members are in attendance on tonight. And we will move on now to 6-3, which is public participation. We will turn that over to Ms. Wilson to take care of for us on tonight. Ms. Wilson?
Yes, ma'am. Chairwoman Harris, we have 5 submissions for tonight. The first one is Brittany Terry. If schools are operating in person, board meetings should as well. Continue to live stream board meetings, but also allow the public to attend in person. If you feel it is unsafe to allow the public to attend in person, then it is also unsafe for our children to attend school in person. Choosing to keep the public out only makes it look like the board has something to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, then allow us to attend in person to prove complete transparency. If you continue to refuse the public to attend in person while continuing to allow our children and teachers to attend school in person, please, during the board meeting, explain the justification behind this. Thank you. The next is Mary Pullman. In the past, it is past time to unmask our children. There is no statistically significant benefit to virus transmission to continue the mandate in our schools. Parents should be allowed to choose whether their children should be subjected to masks all day long. Many of our neighboring counties do not have mask mandates and do not have any higher case levels than our school district. Most states with mask mandates are in the process of dropping them, as South Carolina rightly chose for our state early on. This should be the case in the capital city schools district as well. If masks worked, they would have had a clear benefit to case numbers and transmission in schools. They have had no statistically significant benefits, and in fact, many negative repercussions which will be felt for a long time to come. Unmask our kids. Let parents choose. Students deserve to breathe free again. Richard McDonald. Time to give kids options to wear a mask or not. J.B. Williams. What does this board think about Senate Bill 203 that would allow the governor to remove school board members for pretty much any reason he decides? And that was passed this session by the Senate 41-0, then the House 71-36, and is now being taken up again by the Senate, likely to pass this session. This school district catches a lot of bad publicity, so who knows what this legislation could do for our district. Barry Maddox. I am writing to express my concern regarding the current COVID protocols that remain in place for Richland 1. First, I hoped to be able to express these concerns at the board in person, but would like to know when these meetings will again be open to the public. It is past time to remove the mask mandate for students and staff at our schools. Countless studies confirm that masks have a negative impact on a child's development, particularly young children. Additionally, over the past month, we have learned that the current variants of the virus are far less lethal, with cases soaring to all-time highs while deaths have remained low compared to the initial surge and the Delta variant. As has been the case with every single variant, children are the least vulnerable. Furthermore, the general ineffectiveness of masks to reduce spread or infection renders the entire strategy even more superfluous. According to the latest data, there have been 770 COVID deaths under the age of 17 in the past 2 years. For comparison, in a given 2-year period for the same demographic, approximately 8,000 died from car crashes, 1,800 from drowning, and 700 from fires. Simply put, children are essentially at the same risk of death from COVID from a fire, 10 times more likely to die in a car crash, 3 times more likely to drown, and 36 times more likely to die from injury in general. Given these risks, few would recommend that children not be allowed in buildings, cars, and pools. Parents are more than capable to make these decisions for their children, just as they make other risk assessment decisions on their behalf. While it's true that the virus is still a risk, specifically for the older and more immune-compromised among us, vaccines and natural immunity through infection provide great protection. It's time that we put our kids first and stop asking them to sacrifice so that adults can feel more comfortable. That is all, Chairwoman Harris.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson. Again, to those that saw fit to send comments into the board, we certainly appreciate it and want to let you know that we won't respond on tonight. However, we will respond to you in writing within 7 to 10 business days. At this time, we will move on to the consent agenda, which is 7.1 to approve the January 25th minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner Bishop. We'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous. The minutes for the January 25th meeting has been approved. We'll move on to 8, which is the Office of Operations, with 8.1, which is a contract to Uno Playground on-site license bundles. Ms. Outing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to award a contract to Exton Technology LLC to provide Uno Playground on-site license bundles. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner Bishop. We'll now open the floor for any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Sorry.
Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous. The contract, as previously mentioned, has been approved. Thank you, Ms. Outing. We'll move to 8.2, which is the approval of the continued resolution by Ms. Sherry Matthew Hazel.
Mrs. Chair, Board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration requests a continuing resolution be passed by the board to facilitate business operations for the 22-23 school year. With the approval of this resolution, the administration will be authorized to encumber funds from the 22-23 budgets so that required items could be ordered at this time. The authority will be limited to the amount of the 2021-22 budgets and be effective until the Board of School Commissioners approve a fiscal budget for the 22-23 school year. The administration so recommends.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner Devine. We'll now open the floor for any questions or comments. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. The ayes have it. The vote is unanimous. The continuing resolution has been approved. Thank you, Ms. Matthew Hazel. We'll now move to 9, which is the Office of Human Resources, 9.1, which is our personnel HR update. Dr. Long.
Madam Chair, Board of Commissioners, and Dr. Witherspoon, the personnel human resource update was provided for you all during the executive session. I'll answer any questions if you all have any.
Okay, this is an information item. Are there any questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, hearing none. Thank you. We'll move on to 9.2, which is the hiring of personnel. Dr. Long.
The administration recommends hiring the teachers on the attached list for the 2022-2023 year. There are 6 teachers listed. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner King. We'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Seeing none, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lomanak.
Dr. Long, all these are for next year, right? None are for this year.
Right.
What are the current teacher vacancy numbers for this year?
We have 84.
Okay. And transfer requests were due last Friday. Do we know whether there's an increase in transfer requests this year over last year?
I don't know. I didn't check for that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Let the record reflect the vote is 7-0. The hiring of personnel, as previously stated, has been approved. Thank you, Dr. Long. We'll now move to 10, which is the Office of the Board. 10-1, the board report. This is an opportunity where a board member can speak to an agenda, non-agenda item as they so see fit, other than the fact that we do continue to do our class and school visits, as well as our chat with the chair with our middle and our high school students. So at this time, we will open the floor for any board reports. Commissioner King?
Okay. Yes, thank you. Fabulous visit this week at, what was it? Read
Southeastern.
across, read across. World Reading Day of some sort. Anyway, it was great. It was reading at South Kilburn, and gosh, it feels good to be in a classroom with little kiddos. They're fantastic, and I want to thank our teachers. It's my hats off to them for the work that they do every day. Dr. Witherspoon, I received, based on my last request, to have the teacher turnover rates over 7 years. We did get your report for the district, but I was just wondering why we didn't get it by school.
Did refer in that report, there was information on the South Carolina report cards site at the State Department. Beyond that, a certain date, that information is in storage, and staff has not had an opportunity to go back that far.
So how far back does it go? Is that information that is, so y'all don't track that by school?
The information that's on the report card site, that can be searched by school.
No, I guess my request is the teacher turnover by school. Is that something that your administration not track?
There's information, but that is, some of that is in storage beyond a certain date, so folks would have to go to an offsite, go through records and that type of thing.
So how far back do you keep it?
We would have to check that, Ms. King.
Okay, any other questions, Ms. King?
Yes, if you could please check out. So how do you, so how do you come up with a district teacher turnover?
That information beyond what's on the state report card, again, that information is in storage. So someone would have to go to that site.
But you gave us the information over the last
Well, we had
7,
the aggregate numbers.
the last 7 years, but.
We do have the aggregate numbers.
So from 1 year to the next, you're not tracking the teacher turnover by school? Or am I not?
The last 3 years are on the South Carolina report card site. Beyond that, that's in storage. They would have to go in storage and locate that
So
information.
could we get the last 3 years?
That's on the report card site.
Okay. So let me get this right. As a commissioner, when I ask this, I'm assuming that your shop tracks that. So the response I got, essentially we all got, is that as a school board member, I mean, that's important information, obviously, right? So I would have to go to the State Department of Education and pull up the report card for all 50 schools for 7 years.
It goes back 3 years.
Oh, for 3 years. So
And
you
w-
want, so I would have to go through 150 report cards.
Well, we could take
Because-
staff off of what they're doing and do that.
Well, I
But again,
would-
as I indicated, that would be in a queue. We do have an information request queue, and that would be something we would have staff go do, but that would be some time.
All right, so I will tell you, I will just make a statement. I'm shocked. I am shocked that Richland One is not tracking the teacher turnover by school on an annual basis and not keep a trend. It's shocking to me.
Well, Ms. King, what I did say...
I'm just making a statement.
Okay, well, I will again say that information is in storage, so it can be retrieved. That's not to say it isn't kept, it isn't tracked, and so forth. So just providing clarity.
All right. Ms. King, are you done? All right. Any other board reports? Commissioner Lomanak?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. I've just got 4 quick things. One, I want to say, again, what a great time we had at South Kilburn. I think everybody else was there, and it was a great morning, and the staff and the kids were awesome. Mr. Cunningham's 5th grade class was probably the best, but I'm sure some of y'all would argue otherwise. But I really did appreciate him and his class. I also had a wonderful time, the chat with the chair. with some Hand Middle School students who were not surprisingly just awesome. They were very complimentary. They were also provided some really insightful, constructive criticism that you could tell was very thoughtful on their part, and I appreciated both what they said and how they said it, and I continue to be amazed by kids. I do want to say, I know I mention this each time, as I hear from teachers and teaching assistants and assistant principals, I continue to be obviously very concerned. There are no easy answers to how we retain and recruit. But for every teacher that we retain, it's one less teacher that we have to recruit in a time when recruiting is so hard. I do have two suggestions I'd at least like the district to consider. One is raise our substitute teacher pay so that it is in line with local districts. And two, I know that the district looked into and did decide to pay teachers for planning periods, but only if they lose 3 or more in a given week. I get it. It's money, it's logistics, and I do appreciate the fact that that was a real change for the district. But planning periods are important for teachers for the quality of teaching that they can deliver. So for a teacher to lose 2 a week for 8 weeks and one teacher to lose 3 a week just one time means that one teacher gets compensated for 3 planning periods and the other person does not get compensated for 8 or 10 or 16 or whatever. So I'd ask that we review that policy and see if we can pay teachers for each planning period that they lose. I also wonder if at some point we need to have a working session or a retreat or something sooner rather than later where we bring together Dr. Long and Dr. Broussard and other folks as well as some teachers and principals and see what kind of things we may do that are totally new and creative and thinking outside the box that might require board approval and policy changes to see what we can do to retain teachers, because the trend is brutal, and the latest stats are that half of the teachers in the country are going to leave the profession, and Richland One's not going to, obviously, I don't think, be an exception to this trend. So whatever we can do, I think is important. Lastly, a memo analyzing the purchase cards, which are credit cards that certain administration officials and school leaders receive. A memo analyzing the use of those cards and the monitoring of those cards has been disseminated quite widely. I've been approached with this memo at the State House and elsewhere when I was advocating for public schools. The memo itself raises, I think, serious questions about the monitoring of these expenditures. The Richland One internal audit report from August of 2021 echoes many of these same concerns. I would ask, and I don't think that we can just tell people to trust us. I think we've got to show it. I think the only way we're going to clear this up is to be as open and transparent as we can about getting to the bottom of how some of this money was spent and whether the monitoring that was necessary was in place. So Chairwoman Harris, since you have the authority to set an agenda, I'd ask respectfully that you set either a working session, which I think is what this really deserves, or at least set it on the agenda for the next board meeting so that we can get answers to some of these questions and start clearing the air about this money.
Is that a conclusion of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me respond to 2 things. As you suggested, Dr. Witherspoon doing a working session with faculty and staff to figure out how to retain teachers, et cetera. I believe, Dr. Witherspoon, you have a group already established that you meet with of teachers and staff?
Teacher forum group, yes.
Teacher forum group, and how often do you all meet?
The group meets monthly, and I appreciate Ms. McCants for, because it's on board meeting days, they are changing that date. I'm very appreciative of that, but we've been getting feedback from that group since the beginning of the year.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully that helps to answer that question for you, Mr. Lomanak. To your last comment in regards to, would you call it a memorandum?
A memo.
A memo that has been shared, and I appreciate you bringing that into light because I had not seen the memo. And in reading the memo, it's rather disturbing because I'm trying to figure out how we get a 60-plus page document from a 20-page report from a certified credentialized auditor that is an internal auditor And you know, I think that it's important that we take time to talk about concerns and issues, because that's fair to any board member. The internal auditor works for the board, and the internal auditor does an ongoing annual risk assessment. That's his responsibility for us. As a matter of fact, we're one of very few districts that have that, and I really pride ourselves and my colleagues on making sure that we've had this in place for a number of years. I started reading some of this executive summary, but I had to put it down because a lot of what I read, in my opinion, it misconstrued what the internal auditor was saying. And as we talk about this, I want us to be very cautious and careful that we don't mischaracterize anyone or mischaracterize this district. You talked about a memo that the internal auditor provided for us in August of 2021. I know that was way before you got here. It's nothing new to the board. We receive reports all the time from the internal auditor. That's his job. His job is to do a risk assessment so there isn't any issues. But I think the best person to speak to their report, I don't know if he's here on tonight, is the person that put the report out in the first place. And that is the internal auditor, who audits internally for this board to make sure that we stay in compliance, et cetera. At one point in time, we had an audit committee, which the board has a right to appoint an audit committee. And you can appoint any committee at the discretion of the board, but once their responsibility and duties are fulfilled, we can dissolve that committee. So that is, number one, why the audit committee doesn't exist anymore, because I believe that comment was made earlier. One of the reasons why the audit committee, Mr. Devine, was dissolved is because it was, even though it was a 3-person group of board members, we felt the need for all 7 board members to receive the same information at one time. One of the things that the auditor has been very, very good at doing is providing assessments of what's going on internally to make sure that we minimize and contain risks that could create bigger problems for the district. So, Mr. Washington, if you're here, I can't see out that far. I would like for you to respond to this, because I think as a board, before we go and set an agenda for a work session to discuss a concern, I am still waiting to hear what the concern is. I can't go off for somebody taking somebody's report and creating their assessment. I have to get it straight from the horse's mouth. And the horse's mouth on tonight is Mr. Washington, who provided the report for us. I've heard a lot of things said about the report. Mr. Washington, good evening. Glad to see you back with us and doing well.
Thank you.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot on tonight. But I just think it's important that you wrote this report. Do you know what report we're talking about, the August 2021 risk assessment? I think it's a P cards.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Dr. Witherspoon. Yes, ma'am, that is an internal report that was issued, I believe, in August of 21, yes.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about when you do those risk assessments? Let me just ask one important question. Mm-hmm. Did you find fraud?
No, ma'am. The internal audit report on P-card operations did not know any indications of fraud.
Okay, and when you did the assessment, it's your responsibility to make recommendations and suggestions to the superintendent or whomever, board, whatever, on how we move forward. You did make suggestions, correct?
Yes, that is the purpose behind doing that assessment, yes.
And in your August 2021 report, in those suggestions, you made them directly to the superintendent, correct?
Yes.
Okay, has the district come into compliance to what your suggestions and recommendations?
Yes, as part of the administration responding to those opportunities to improve, recommendations, if you will, they did provide those necessary responses and put forth an action plan to address all of those concerns, yes.
Okay, so I would go back to my colleague and ask, so Commissioner Lomadak, help us understand. I'm trying to understand, you're sharing with us a memorandum of someone that took a report, internal report, disseminated it to whomever, lot of people out here to say something other than what Mr. Washington has said. Does that report that your memorandum you receive conflict with the report of the author of the report?
Well, so there are a number of issues. The memo covers a different year than the 2021 audit report, and it notes, for example, something that's objectively true. Some of our P-card transparency reports that, as you know, are required by law, were incomplete. They were wrong. There are items missing on the website now that are supposed to be on there. I checked, they're missing. That's something that needs to be addressed and corrected, because currently our website is out of compliance with the law in terms of recording those numbers. Now, Mr. Washington, if I could ask a couple questions. You didn't find fraud because you noted that some of the information didn't have the requisite documentation. So you didn't know how the items that were bought were used, correct?
I'm not sure I understand that question. All the details of my report are outlined in the audit report itself. Some of the issues were procedure in nature, and those have been addressed by the administration, and they continue to be addressed through their action plan that they've set forth.
Well, let's go through a couple of those procedures. Tell me about the maximum per item purchase that you can use on a card.
The spending limitation, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here from procurement or finance, the spending limitation is, I believe, 1,000 or 1,500, if I can recall.
Did you find instances in which people had split the cost of a single transaction to avoid that $1,500 limit?
Yes, but to again address whether or not, if the question is regarding fraud, we have to look at materiality and the intent. My audit found that in those instances where people did the split transactions, it was because of a misunderstanding of the procedures, primarily, yes.
All right, and you noted that in one instance, cleaning supplies were mailed to a staff member's home, and you did not know whether those were for personal or business use, correct?
I would have to go back to my report. You're talking about specific items that I have not looked at in months, so I'm not familiar with that particular transaction.
Do you remember saying in your report
Mr.
that...
Hold 1 second. Do you have a date for the cleaning supplies?
It's on page 25 of the audit report.
Okay. You can go ahead.
Do you recall stating in your report that some of the purchases could be for either business or personal use, but you were unable to determine because there was a lack of documentation?
I believe that was one of the conditions that was noted, yes.
Okay. And what would be, can you think of an appropriate reason that someone who lives in Columbia would have spent $2,100 at a Holiday Inn in Columbia on December 22nd?
That wasn't part of my report.
22nd of 2021 or
Of
2020?
2020.
Okay.
What about food purchases on New Year's Eve? Were you ever able to ascertain whether the hundreds of dollars worth of food purchases on New Year's Eve were for business or personal use?
In my report, I put forth the conditions that were noted and opportunities to improve, i.e. recommendations. The response to that question would come from the administration.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at, right? Your job was not actually to uncover the answer to that question, because what you were pointing out was that there was no documentation, and you're not a magician, right? So I don't expect that you were able to find that out. In fact, you noted on page 25 at one point that there was a food truck, location in same zip code as car holder, not near school. So you have questions about that weren't answered because there wasn't anything written on the receipt and there was no documentation indicating what the food truck was used for. And you went on and on footnoting some of the red flagged transactions and noted that you just couldn't ascertain whether some of these were for business or personal use. And I think you're right. You can't answer that. That's what the administration has to do. Your report raised those questions. Some were procedural, like avoiding the $1,500 maximum purchase. You also noted that there were some different signatures for the same person. Some were signature stamps, and you noted that some monthly statements were not reviewed until 240 days beyond the time that they were supposed to be reviewed. So, you know, in the context of the other report, which did raise some similar red flags in terms of spending, I do think that we need to try to get some answers to that. Whether anyone was disciplined, I mean, I should know that there were clearly policies that were violated. And there absolutely will be some reasonable explanations for some of these purchases. But it casts a pall on all of them when we've got questions like these and no answers. And during this time period, we're suspending teachers' licenses for a year so that they can't engage in their profession for a year in the state of South Carolina. And we seem unwilling to want to get to the bottom of where some of this money went. And Mr. Washington, I think, did a very good job in raising important questions, acknowledging where policies were ignored, where monitoring didn't happen. And I don't think we get to just ask Mr. Washington, did you discover fraud? That wasn't his job. His job was to analyze the policies and whether we were following them. And the answer is we weren't. And I don't think we're going to be able to get past this. I mean, I'll tell you, you go to the State House and argue that public schools need more money, which is what I was doing, and somebody hands you this document, it's not good. I was arguing against Senate Bill 935. So I think that we really do need to set some time aside to address this and get some answers to the questions that Mr. Washington raised in his report, and then also get information that's current to make sure that all of those issues have been taken care of, that every receipt has something written on it so that we know how it's being used, so we don't have the questions that Mr. Washington had. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Done, Mr. Lomanak? And again, to your point, Mr. Lomanak, because again, I'm going to be real careful with saying the word fraud, because, you know, I know of a very rich mayor right now that has about $50 million. I want to be real careful as we talk about this, and I think your concerns are legitimate, and to say that we're not concerned, I think that's very unfair to the board, because if we wasn't concerned, I wouldn't have asked you to bring this up tonight. As I stated to you before, where you were trying to bring it up was in a committee meeting, and that's definitely not what we do, because it wasn't following for you. You all were given an agenda that is set by the superintendent and myself, but to make the entire board aware of the concerns. But to Mr. Washington, your responsibility as the auditor is to highlight those potential issues in the district so that we don't have fraud. And I believe that's what the gist of your report was. The gist of your report was not to say that half of the staff of Richland 1 are making purchases that are not supposed to happen. You did a risk assessment, you gave us the report of what the assessment said, but I think what we are all missing, Mr. Lomanak, is that the report tells us where we move forward to improve. I think that's the piece that you're missing, is his job is to come in and assess the situation, get with the superintendent, and the superintendent divvies down to his staff what needs to happen going forward, that this does not occur or continue to occur. And from the onset, I asked Mr. Washington, did you make a recommendation to the superintendent? He said, yes, I did. I asked him, did they comply? He said, yes, they did. So I'm still trying to, you know, in the board, you can tell me if you want a work session to discuss Mr. Lomanak's concern, and I think we all have concerns. I have concerns about a lot of things. I have concerns about people that work against the district to harm the district. And all we're trying to do is educate kids, but I'm not going to call a work session for that. What I would simply say is, if there are concerns in that assessment from 2021, you know, let's find out the answer to the 3 questions as we move forward, and we move forward. It's no such thing as we can't move forward. Yes, we can. The purpose of the internal auditor, if we didn't want to be transparent about issues in a district or any district, we wouldn't have an internal auditor. But an internal auditor is there to point out weaknesses and make recommendations for us to strengthen the way we operate. The P card is not set up under a policy. There are procurement policies that it has to follow. So we've noted that those policies, those procedures with procurement had not been followed. The question is, Mr. Washington, did you make a recommendation to the superintendent to strengthen that area? And the response was yes. Okay, so when it's time for Mr. Washington to go back and where are you at in your schedule of reviewing and analyzing the P card? I know you normally have your calendar mapped out. When is your next P card audit?
With regards to a follow-up review?
Yes.
Yes, by standards, I am compelled to do what is called a follow-up, and that's basically just to review where the district is with regards to their action plan that they set forth. Are those controls that were implemented effective? That's the premise behind doing a follow-up review, yes.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So even after you gave the report, you come back and do a follow-up review just to make sure that we are complying.
Yes.
I think that is awesome, Dr. Witherspoon, that we have an internal auditor that is making sure that not only that he makes the recommendations, but that he follows up to make sure that we are complying with that. Do you know when you will do your follow-up?
By standard, it should be from 6 to 18 months. And, it's not set in stone.
Okay.
The main concern is that the administration has set forth an action plan to address those recommendations. That's the most important part. I'm duty bound to do a follow-up anywhere between 6 to 18 months from that point.
Okay. Okay, can you and the board, we can talk about this if we need to, request that Mr. Washington do a follow-up within the next 6 months? And 6 to 12 months on the P card?
Yes, we can do that. As a matter of fact, it is in the current audit plan, but there are other priorities that were established when we put that audit plan out.
Okay.
I don't have to speak to those particular items, but there are some other priorities that are already in place for this fiscal year.
Okay.
Time permitting, we can go do the follow-up this fiscal year or early next fiscal period.
Okay. Well, if you can get back to us, and you can just let myself or Eva know, and we will communicate that with the board so that they will know that you have set those wheels in motion.
Okay.
To do a follow-up. Are there any other questions or comments at this time for Mr. Washington before Commissioner King?
So, Mr. Washington, your initial analysis or audit of P cards date from when?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Your last P card audit dates from when?
The audit fieldwork was conducted during the spring of 2020. That fieldwork was completed by summer of 2021. The years are rolling through so fast now. That report was actually issued August of 21, but the fieldwork was completed in the spring of 21. Not 2021, I'm sorry.
Okay, and what about the procurement audit?
The procurement audit?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done a procurement audit.
Oh, I thought that I had seen in your memo that you had done some procurement work. No?
No.
Okay, I'll have to go back and look. All right.
That was specifically an operational review of P card operations. It was an audit of P card operations, not procurement.
Oh, okay. And you did that when?
That was conducted in the spring of 21.
Spring of 21. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Good, Ms. King. Anyone else?
I just have one question.
Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you. Mr. Washington, how many purchase card audits have you done in Richland 1?
One.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Harris. Chairwoman
Okay.
Harris.
Okay. Did you want to elaborate? You look like you were a little confused just now.
I was just wondering the nature of that question. How many have I done? It's just one.
Okay, in
Yeah.
August of 2021?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Washington. Again, we will wait to get that information from you to share. But at the same time, as I've stated to my colleagues, the internal auditor's job, he is our risk assessor. And he comes in, he assesses what we do as it relates to procedures. This is not an I gotcha. He's a part of the team. He comes in, he assesses potential risk, he makes recommendations, and the superintendent complies to those recommendations. And as you just heard, after a certain period of time, he comes back and reassesses to make sure that the procedures and protocols that he has requested are in place. And we as a board are kept informed in that information in that regard. Thank you so much, Ms. White. Yes, sir.
If I may, for point of clarification and for full transparency, way back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, there was some advisories presented regarding the P-card function, primarily because it was new, it was in development phase, and so the internal audit function did provide some advisories along those lines.
So you didn't just start doing P-cards in 2021. You've been doing it for quite some time.
Well, there's a difference between an actual formal audit versus just reviewing the process and providing advisories as that process is being developed.
Right.
So those were advisories back in 2013, 14.
Okay. Sounds good. And I when you said one, I was kind of a little hesitant to say anything because I know that we've talked about P-cards several times in my 10 years.
Right.
But I think that one of the things that we asked of you about 3 years ago, right before COVID, was, and I think Dr. Witherspoon even asked for this too, is that you go departments and start analyzing everything, not just for risk assessments, but also for best practices. So I know that wasn't the first time we talked about the P-cards, because I've seen some reports on some stuff that was booklets full. So I appreciate you clarifying that. Any other questions for the auditor at this time before we move forward? Mr. Lomanak.
Thank you. Mr. Washington, that reminded me, you indicated in your report that you made recommendations in 2014 that were not followed. Do you remember what those recommendations were? You indicated that they were informal recommendations, not part of an official report.
I don't put forth recommendations unless I conduct a formal audit. That was part of a review process, if you will, providing oral advisories. There was no written report and no formal recommendations made.
So explain, maybe I misunderstand this sentence. A formal report was not issued at that time, 2014, but audit advisories were issued to the administration as the program was being developed. Some of those advisories were not implemented. Do you know what those advisories were that were not implemented?
I would have to go back to my work papers. That was probably 2013, 2012, I can't recall.
Okay, thank you.
But as you stated, that was advisory. That wasn't the formal audit just yet, correct?
That's correct. There was no report back in 13.
Okay.
Or
All
12, 13, I can't recall exactly what year. Yes.
Say that again. Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris, Chairwoman Harris. Thank you to my colleague for bringing this to our attention. Like he, I too, State House advocating for Senate Bill 935 and some other bills as well. I did not receive this document as well, but I want to go to the source document as he has mentioned. Mr. Washington, do you have any restrictions or impediments to doing your job?
No, sir. That would be a violation of my standards set forth by the internal auditing professional.
And you are a professional licensed internal auditor, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. And so, as you do the audit universe, as you used to tell us, I remember we talked about the triangle that you used to talk
The triangle?
to us about.
Oh, the fraud triangle, yes.
Correct. So, as you do the audit assessment, and then you come up with the audit plan each year, this particular item just happened to be part of your audit plan based off the audit assessment you had done some years ago. Is that correct?
That's correct. Part of my duties is to conduct ongoing risk assessment for all programs, activities, functions, departments within the district. Occasionally, some of those assessments will evolve into an audit. And that's when I present the annual audit plan to the board and the administration. Yes, that is correct.
And you've completed, or you've already submitted the audit plan for 2022, is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the one that's currently in place, yes.
Current year.
Yes.
All right, can you give us maybe one or two of the things that you're auditing? Or you can't say just yet? If you can't say, don't say it.
I can. It was established back in summer when the audit plan was presented that we were going to prioritize what we call student activity fund audits.
Okay.
Those are done on a cyclical basis, on a rotating basis, if you will, covering all high schools. So that's where the priority lies in this fiscal year, along with the follow-up on that operation audit that was conducted at the end of the prior fiscal year, which is the P-card audit. So those are the primary items on the current annual audit plan.
Okay. Let me turn to the superintendent for just a second. Dr. Witherspoon, based off of his report and the administration working forward, I think this is another opportunity for growth for the organization.
Okay.
And we talk about growth with our students, and now this is a part of the growth for our organization to ensure that the organization continues to thrive and continue to grow. And so as we look at the growth model, here is now an opportunity for us to grow and to have that growth. And so, Dr. Witherspoon, are there any impediments to what you do to ensure we have growth, particularly in this particular instance that is brought up?
No. To piggyback on or to reiterate Mr. Washington's points, in addition to providing information certainly to the board and the administration, he and I meet on a regular basis. He shares information with me. As Chairwoman Harris indicated, I have gone to Mr. Washington and asked him to look into some concerns that sometimes make it to get on my radar, so to speak. And he does, and he comes back and advises whether or not, as he's indicated, that should turn into a full-scale audit or additional spot checks and follow-ups. And then I, in turn, will go to respective departments, depending on his information that he shares, and in those uncertain terms, certainly make sure there's an understanding that any issues and concerns are to be addressed and are to be resolved moving forward. So if Mr. Washington were to run into any impediments or what have you, those are quickly removed. So that, again, as you've indicated, this is about the improvement of the organization in all of its aspects.
Okay. That pretty much answers my questions. I appreciate you bringing that forward. Chairwoman Harris.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah. Well, let me ask this. So going back to kind of what Chairwoman Harris has said in regards to responding to some of these items, we said in 6 to 12 months we'll get a response back. Is that what we said?
I think what we're asking of him, and I can get with Mr. Washington later, to look at what's on his schedule, what things we've given him that we probably could, I'm not gonna say push to the side because it all matters, but maybe get back in there with this piece to ensure that those things, you've already said that from your observations, that the things that you asked for in August of 2021, district is complying, and it's February. So if you can get back in there and just do a follow-up, because, as I heard my colleague mention some specific things, I guess, you're on the board so long, you could think to yourself, okay, we could have been bringing somebody in town to interview them for a job, et cetera. So I don't want to get into the weeds of all of that stuff. I want you to be able to go back, the board wants you to be able to go back and do an assessment of the P cards to make sure that the things that you asked for in those recommendations are being followed and being carried out and get that back to the board. And if we need to bring you back face-to-face in an executive session, or whatnot, we can set that up where you can come and speak to the board directly. That way, we are all getting the same information. And going back to one of the things that I said earlier, this is one of the reasons why the audit committee was pretty much dissolved, because it was 3 board members getting the information, and the other 4 were kind of sitting here blindsided. Now we get the same information at the same time. And that it works better, that everybody is in the loop at all times. So I think that if you can go ahead and look at your calendar, and we can talk later, and then I can inform the board as to what's your timeline of getting an assessment done for us and to them. And then we can set it up where you can come back and present to the board.
Right, and we can definitely set that on the calendar, but as a final point of clarification, the report is never distributed until there's a response and an action plan
Right.
presented by the administration in response to the recommendation. So that was done, and that's why the report was distributed.
Right.
The follow-up basically entails how effective those things are that they've implemented.
Okay.
So, yes, we can put that on the calendar to make that
Sounds
assessment,
good.
yes.
That's what you want, Mr. Yvonne?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Washington.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right.
We're still in board report,
I have
so
one.
we're gonna open up
Madam
the floor,
Chair?
because we,
I've just,
can I just say this right quick? We're gonna open up the floor, because I know it's been mainly just 2 or 3 board members giving reports, but want to make sure that no other board member doesn't, okay? Okay, we'll come, okay. Ms. King, go ahead, and then we're gonna go to Commissioner Myers so we can get her report.
So I was on the audit committee, and actually, you and I have served for a while. When I joined the board 10 years ago, I was really pleased that Richland 1 had that position, the internal auditor. My assessment of that function is that it is grossly understaffed for the size of the district and the complexity of the operations. So that's my first observation. Secondly, we do have a policy that states that the audit committee is a standing committee, and it should be as such. And the board would always get reports anyway, because Mr. Washington just stated it. He would issue his report to the whole board. Now, there were 3 board members on that committee that were able to ask him questions and then get preliminary report, et cetera. But in the end, the whole board would get exactly the same information in his reports. I will tell you that I am a fierce defender for us to keep this audit function in the district and actually inflate it. If there is a department that needs to be more staffed, it's his, because I see that we have a number of operational breakdowns, as are noted in his reports over the years. And I will say publicly that as a member of this board, I have been absolutely flabbergasted at the lack of responsiveness from the administration to the observations of the internal auditor and the time that he has to give again and again and again, more time for people to respond. I have never, ever seen an organization not respond on the dot to an internal auditor as it is done here. And I'm really disappointed. I'm glad to be able to say this in public. I'm sure there'll be differing opinions, which is just fine. But I do think that this is a very important, very, very critical position. And his reports are public reports. These are not executive session items unless they deal with maybe personnel issues. That is not FOIA privileged. The public has to understand that the district is well-run, that when the internal auditor finds things to improve, that they are done on the spot. It has to be extremely transparent. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Ms. King, to your point, let me be real clear. I believe we are being very transparent. As a matter of fact, that transparency word is used a whole lot. And sometimes that's not the case for a lot of us. But when it comes to discussing this district and what's in the best interest of students and making sure that we are following procedures and protocols and accountable for the dollars that are given to us, I believe this district is doing an exceptional job in making sure that we're doing that. When you talk about standing committees, the audit committee was never a standing committee. It was agreed upon by the board at that time because with us coming in new, there was things that we wanted to know more about. And when Mr. Washington started reporting to us, what we found, Mr. Devine, was board meeting night was just not the place to get that report because it lasted for an hour, sometimes 2 hours long, just the audit report. When we started the audit committee, again, I was on the committee as well as yourself and some others. Mr. Ford served with us, some others. But there was information that we got directly from Mr. Washington that sometimes the rest of the board got just the document. And I think that was one of the reasons why we felt the need, okay, everybody gets to report at the same time so they get the same information. But I think that even this conversation right now, it's a very transparent conversation. You know why? Because when you don't have anything to hide, you can talk about this stuff. I'm not going to sit here and say that for years and years, the district has had operational breakdowns. We got to be real careful. Any organization has potential for growth. The biggest room in any house is improvement. If we were to sit here and say that we can't improve in areas as a district, we would be lying and we would be doing ourselves a disservice. But what we cannot sit here and say is that anyone is doing something deliberate or dishonest or malicious or anything of that nature. And again, that's the role of the auditor, is to come in and make sure we stay above board. And I don't want to call him back to the mic because he's walked a great distance, but Mr. Washington, you know, the comment was made by my colleague that we've had operational breakdowns for years. You monitor this for us. Are we having operational breakdowns? I mean, let us know. The 7 board members are sitting here. I am at a place that we got to speak sound truth. Make sure that what we communicate out here to people are truth. There are operational concerns, there are operational opportunities for growth as in any organizations, but are we about to break down as a district operationally? Are we having operational breakdowns, Mr. Washington?
No, ma'am, that's a relative term. None of my audits have found any, what you might call material or egregious situations that.
Can you say that again? None of your audits? So the district is not in operational breakdown mode right now?
There are always going to be, in any organization, some procedural concerns that need to be addressed, and I convey those along with an opportunity to improve. The key is that the administration accepts those and puts forth the plan to address those recommendations.
Okay, and I appreciate you answering that. And then to my other question, when you need information, are you getting the information that you need from the superintendent and his staff?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, is it Commissioner Myers? And then we're going to move out of board report. Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Yes.
I would just like to thank the staff here for drill last night. They had hosted the middle school championship basketball game. I want to give kudos to Creighton Girls Middle School team. They was the champion, and runner-up for Sanders Middle School team as well. And as for the boys middle school team, I also want to give kudos to Southeast Middle School boys. There was the champion last night in hand for team runner-up. That's it.
Thank you so much, Miss Myers. I'm sorry. Dr. Wilson, she's stealing some of your thunder.
Yeah.
To the board, I do want to read a letter that I received that I think it's important for all of you to hear. It says, on behalf of the South Carolina Athletic Administrators Association Executive Director Jerry Lynn, President Joe Monminer, and the SCAAA Board, it is my pleasure to announce that you have, Dr. Craig Witherspoon, been selected for recognition as the SC AAA 3A 2A 1A Superintendent of the Year for 2022. Wow. And it goes on to say, Dr. Witherspoon, you are being recognized for your commitment, dedication and service to the students and the interscholastic athletic and activity programs at your schools, Richland County School District 1, your classification region, and state. The SCAAA extends this invitation and looks forward to recognizing you in person at their annual awards breakfast, which is slated for March 16th, 2022. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's congratulate our superintendent on such a great honor. It is the SCAAA, which is the South Carolina Association of Athletic. Am I saying this right, Coach Metz?
That's Coach Metz.
It's the South Carolina Athletic Administrators Association. Okay, and he is, and as a matter of fact, I was told he won in 3 categories, which is 3A, 2A, and 1A. So there's also another superintendent that will be, I guess, 4A and 5A. So congratulations, Dr. Witherspoon. And certainly we echo their sentiments, something that Commissioner Bishop and Mr. Devine, we often talk about. You know, almost every year we've been at a state championship for some athletic program. And speaking to what Commissioner Myers just said, you know, parents didn't realize last night that that middle school championship is something that the district took on. And I remember some middle schoolers saying to us, why can't we have our own championship in Sportsorama like everyone else? So Dr. Witherspoon, thank you for always listening to the children and putting things in place that doesn't just enhance them academically, but holistically. And I think that we have one of the best athletic programs in the world. So we certainly applaud you and appreciate all that you've done to strengthen our athletic program here in Richland School District 1. If there isn't any other, Commissioner King?
Madam Chair, if you'll indulge me for a second. So Chat with the Chair is a really great, it's a great moment for the board to get to sit down with middle schoolers and high schoolers. But it started out as the chair mostly would sit down with them. And I have found that, you know, all of us sit down, and Chat with the Chair is not as well understood as if it were to be changed to Chat with the Board. I think everybody would then understand that. I just make a suggestion that maybe we can just change the name to Chat with the Board. For future sit down. That's all I wanted to bring in.
Well, the board is certainly welcome to discuss. I just think that, I think it's got the name of Chat with the Chair because it's a catchy title. And I think that when we go and meet with the children, they see the 7 of us chairing the district. I think it goes beyond me because I can't do it all. Right. I did attempt the middle schools at first when we first started with the middle schools, but now Eva's been so gracious to share that with everybody. But I think Chat with the Chair just really speaks to the chairing of the district, all 7 of us sitting in the seats that we're in. But if it's something that the board wants to change, I'm not the person to stand in their way, but you all are going to have to tell me that that's what we want to do. Mr. Bishop?
Madam Chair, if you through with that point, I want to go back, that's all. I thought you was about to be through with that
Okay,
point.
anyone want to speak to this?
I'll speak to it, but I wouldn't want to change it because originally it was the board chair and 1 or 2 members.
Right.
And each board chair can kind of do what they want to do. So I would keep it Chat with the Chair because the next chair may go to each of the schools and each of the Chat with the Chairs. So at this time, I would like to keep it Chat with the Chair.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. All right, Ms. King, we can talk about it some more later, but I think everybody's kind of okay. Commissioner Bishop?
Just want to go back to the recognition that Dr. Witherspoon just received.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also should impress upon people that that's with a C policy average, a C policy.
That's right.
So which means we don't compromise the scholastic part of the student athlete and his achievements to, you know, excel and lead in academics and athletics at the same time. So just wanted to make sure that was publicly put out there, that we still make sure we put the student in front of the athlete in that recognition, okay? Thank you, Dr. Witherspoon. Continue to lead the way you are.
Great point, Commissioner Bishop. Thank you so much. If there are no other, I'm sorry, Commissioner Devine?
Thank you. Let me just get to my, real quick, as my colleagues, Mr. Lomanak and Ms. King has stated, I think Mr. Bishop, I think we all did the reading day the other
Yes, sir.
day at South Kilbourne.
Yes, sir.
Elementary. I too want to thank my second grade class for allowing me to come in and to read and to just share some things about the board and what we do as a board. And so that was fun and delightful to see our young people and see them learning each and every day. Which leads me to my second part. I remind board members of policy BDB, boy, dog, boy. It speaks to the duties of the chairperson. I've noticed in several articles in the paper, our chairperson has not been mentioned in the paper. It's particularly tends to be one, possibly two board members. It specifically says in the policy that the chairperson is the public spokesperson for the board at all times, except as the responsibility is delegated from the chair to the board members. So again, as you talk to the media, board members, you have that right, but just remind them that you're speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the board. And so I just remind us of policy BDB as we move forward. So thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. And I forgot to give my report. I also attended the championship game on last night, which was a definite thrill seeker. But I want to commend the coach of Dreher's basketball team. At the end of the game on last night, Dr. Witherspoon, you know what I'm talking about, to see those players engaging not only with the students but taking care of their facility said a lot about them. So I didn't get a chance to talk to the coach here at Dreher basketball team, but I just want to say kudos to him and the young men that he's working with. We sat in front of them last night, had a great conversation, laughing at my clock purse. But just a great experience to be with those young boys last night and to see at the end them get up and take charge of making sure that their gym was back in place. Said a whole lot about not just teaching them to be winners and leaders on the court, but to take care of home, to take care of their facility. Said a lot. And then I also wanted to share with the board, I didn't get to go and read at South Kilbourne because I had agreed to be at Horror Hill with Miss Lord's first grade class. She is the teacher of the year there at Horror Hill. So we had a chance to celebrate with the kids their not 100th day of school, as they told me. It was actually Miss Harris's 101 days today because you're a day late. But we had a great discussion, and to the point Commissioner King made, it does your heart so good to be in the classroom with the young people and to talk and to engage with them. But wanted to share with you all where I was that day. I had already committed to being at Horror Hill Elementary School. I also want to thank the principal of Hopkins Middle and the others for celebrating us for Board Appreciation Month. I wanted to say this publicly, Dr. Witherspoon, because they didn't have to do it. But it just means a lot to know that the children appreciate, what you're doing out here as board members. So even though it is not January anymore, to my fellow colleagues, we want to again say, on behalf of so many principals, they have said to us, thank you for all that you do to make sure that Richland 1 continues to be a strong district. At this time, we will move on.
Madam Chair.
Okay. And then I got one last thing that I need to mention. Thank you, Dr. Witherspoon, and that is to congratulate my colleague. Many of you don't know this, or you may have heard this, but in South Carolina's School Board Association, there is something called the Boardsman Institution, and something you hear me talk about a lot, and that is the training that we receive. Because one of the things I must say about the School Board Association is if you get the training, you know your job, you know your role, you know what to do, when, how, and everything else. And they do a tremendous job in making sure that we are trained. But I'm honored tonight to recognize my colleague, Mr. Devine, who will be receiving his official plaque on next weekend for reaching level 6. Mr. Devine is one of 4 of us now in the history of Richland 1 to reach that highest level, take the exam, and pass. And I say the exam, and my colleagues, when you get there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But Jasper Salmon was the first. The Honorable Vince Ford was number 2. And I was the first female, and then now Mr. Devine. So, ladies, I need y'all to catch up We need to catch up with these guys, but congratulations to you, Mr. Devine. That is a great accomplishment and achievement, more than these guys will ever know. That when you reach level 6, you've been fully trained, and you know what your job is, and you understand the ins and out of it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? I think you had another comment, Mr.
I better
Bishop.
say something about South Kilbourne.
Okay.
I know Jamie did recognize me, but I wanted to make sure I get invited back. So, to the 5th grade class of South Kilbourne, thank you for inviting me as well. And I know my other colleagues spoke out, so thank you, Jamie, for speaking up for me, but I better say something myself. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bishop, for your report. As we move on in our meeting on tonight, we're at the Office of the Superintendent, which is 11-1, which is the Safety and Security Update. Dr. Witherspoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. In executive session, we shared information with regard to safety and security specific areas with the board through some updates. It was an information item. No action is requested at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, this is an information item. Are there any questions or comments for Dr. Witherspoon? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on to 11.2, which is the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Witherspoon.
Madam Chair, members of the board, as a part of the Superintendent's Report, the board did request at the last meeting that we look at some policies associated with our meetings and other associated laws. And at this time, I will ask Attorney Williams to please present information.
Hello, there was a question about some of the policies, and so what I'll do is just go over a few of them. And do you also want me to answer that other question that was asked, Dr. Witherspoon?
You may.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, can somebody turn up her volume? Or
Can you move it closer to you?
Yes, I was just
perfect. Thank
pulling
you.
my documents, and so I will make sure and
Thank you.
speak louder. I'll start with a question that was asked at the last meeting. A statement was made that the district was in violation of the board meetings, and we are not. Pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, it does not state that you have to have an open meeting. It states that the General Assembly finds that it is vital in a democratic society that public business be performed in an open and public manner so that citizens shall be advised of the performance of public officials and of the decisions that are reached in public activity and in the formulation of public policy. And it further states, toward this end, provisions of this chapter must be construed so as to make it possible for citizens or their representatives to learn and report fully the activities of their public officials at a minimum cost or delay to the person seeking access to public documents or meetings. And our meetings are being streamed. Our meetings are also being shown later on the television. And so our meetings are open. They're not closed meetings. The closed meetings that we have would be in line with the Freedom of Information Act if it states that it is okay to have those meetings in private with the board members only for certain issues, not all issues, just for certain specific issues. But there are others in South Carolina that are streaming as well and taking and doing some other things so that their meetings could be open as well, but our meetings have been open pursuant to the laws. And it will, of course, be up to the board when they make changes for whatever will happen with regard to opening up meetings. So I wanted to state that, which was brought up as well. And then let me pull my policies. One of the policies is policy BCA Board Member Code of Ethics, and that policy basically deals with the vital and important role in our state and country by providing basic foundation for democratic living and for sustaining the American way of life. Therefore, school board membership represents a challenging responsibility. This Code of Ethics is adopted by the board as a guide to its members as they strive to render effective and efficient service to their community. That is Board Policy BCA. And it definitely states, and I won't read all of this, but it definitely states that board members should honor the high responsibility which his or her membership demands by doing several things that are listed. Of course, children are the first thing that board members should be concerned about. And clearly, that is happening for the most part in Richland 1. A board member should respect his or her relationships with other members of the board as well, and it gives some guidance for following those things. A board member should maintain desirable relations with the superintendent of schools and his or her staff by striving to do certain things with the superintendent as well, and specifically addresses presenting personal criticisms of any employee directly to the superintendent. The board members have approved these policies in conjunction with information received from South Carolina School Boards Association, and so that is one of the board policies, that, you may want to pay close attention. I believe BDE, board committees, has already been mentioned, and it sets forth the policies and what happens with those particular policies. And these policies were changed in March of '21, and the purpose is to have some camaraderie in terms of what you're doing, having discussions, reasonable discussions, for the benefit of the district.
I'm good.
Can you hear me?
You're good.
Okay. And that particular policy was mentioned earlier. Policy BHC, staff communications, this particular board policy talks about how the board intends to maintain open channels of communication between itself and the staff. The basic line of communication will, however, be through the superintendent. And you all have talked a great deal tonight about those things that you've done, the open channels that have enabled you to be in the schools, meeting with principals, other individuals, and so forth. Visits to school are important. Board communications to the staff, that's important. And social interaction is important as well. And it's expected that, when you meet at social affairs and other functions, that they will informally discuss such matters as educational trends, issues, innovations, etc. And the intent is to meet together and certainly work for the benefit of the children, the benefit of the district, and certainly to make the most that can be made, as we have done in the past with many students, making sure that they're successful in life. And this board has participated with South Carolina School Boards Association and have certainly, since I've been involved with the board members that are here tonight, they've worked hard, participated with South Carolina School Boards Association to make sure that they are following policies. We took this past school year to review all of the policies to make sure that they're updated so that they can stay on top of those things that need to be done for the benefit of the students and for the benefit of this school district. And I just wanted to share those few policies with you. Information has come up periodically regarding the policies, and that's what I wanted to present this evening.
Thank you, Attorney Williams. Madam Chair, do you?
And we can open the floor for any questions or comments, because I know Doc's got several pieces for us tonight as it relates to the policies, and Ms. Williams, you coming back to us about the I think it's the open meeting law that was mentioned that we were in violation of, and based on your research, we're not in violation because the meetings are open, which I heard from the folk in the General Assembly as well. But so that is good to know. But I wanted to ask you a question, since you're talking about the policies. A lot of times we look at what other districts are doing and say, well, we're not doing a good job of putting policies in place, but we bring policies to our district that are relevant to our population of students, our issues, our needs to operate, correct?
That is correct.
So if a district goes and puts whatever kind of policy in place, doesn't necessarily mean we need that policy as well. We look at our policies, and I know, and I can use the one with the vaping as the perfect example. We had to change our policy as it relates to tobacco, et cetera, because of vaping and the fact that it had gotten so out of hand. So when we make changes to our policies, they're relevant to Richland 1, not what maybe a neighboring district is doing, but specifically relevant to us. Now, there are standing policies we must have.
That is correct.
We've got to have policies for operations, procedures of the governance of the board. But those other policies, a lot of times we pull policies in place that speak directly to our needs and our issues. Right now, in your assessment of our policies, are we on top of our game or are we not, as it relates to relevant policies?
I think that we are on top of our game for relevant policies. Other school districts that I've communicated with have not gone through all of their policies like we have.
Okay.
And several have asked, how did we go about doing this? And they've asked questions, and we communicate on how we were able to accomplish this. It took time, but we were able to accomplish this.
Okay.
And we have had a little shortfall. Some of the individuals working for the School Boards Association got other jobs. They're still in education in those positions. Some have gone on to other school districts. And so it was a slight slowdown on our policies being posted, but they are working diligently to get all of those posted.
Okay.
And I've been talking with them frequently, and they are working on it.
Okay.
Because when we started that process, as soon as we sent that information to them, it didn't take them long to get everything posted, but they are working, and we've been talking about the ones that may have not shown up, that should have shown up, and they said they will get those in place.
So that's done by our folk to put that on our sites and so forth for us.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So we have someone that updates those for us.
Yes.
Okay.
They actually post them through South Carolina School Boards Association.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. Any questions about policies while we're on it before we go to the next layer of the superintendent's report? Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Ms. Williams, you mentioned that other school boards are not allowing people to attend the meetings in person. Can you tell us which ones those are?
I think Jamie knows.
I don't recall saying that.
Okay. So you don't know of any other school boards that aren't allowing people to attend in person?
I'm not.
We're not doing.
Hold 1 second. I
Okay.
believe that was Commissioner Devine, being that he's the School Board Association president. It's about 9 or 11?
I know of 3 or 4. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but if you give me a minute, I can find out for you.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. And Ms. Williams, policy BE is what speaks to the openness of our school board meetings. Is that right? I think y'all revised it last March.
We did revise all of them. Let me get specifically to BE, and I'll be happy to answer your question. I'm listening, though, while you are.
Well, if you read BE, it suggests that the board meetings should allow the public to be in person, except when there's something called a, quote, pandemic designation. And I'm trying to figure out what pandemic designation means. Is that state of emergency? I've just never heard of that phrase, pandemic designation.
So let me
Yeah.
clarify. So back in March of 2020, there were some advisories and advisory and model policies that came out during that time. We probably need to go back and adjust some of this language that was put in there, and because we were still not in person in March of 2021, that language stayed in there. So this came as a model policy from SBA
Right.
at the time.
But do we think that pandemic designation means state of emergency? Because this is what I asked at the last meeting, is I thought what had probably happened, because it happened elsewhere, is people suspended the normal course of operations during the state of emergency. And I'm trying to figure out if that's what this policy was really getting at. It sure seems like it, because it says board members may call in during open session meetings during pandemic designations by the state and/or the United States. At such times, meetings may be conducted via audio or live stream for the public. So it suggests that only when there's something called a pandemic designation can we live stream rather than be in person. And that's our policy. So I'm just trying to figure out if that means state of emergency. The state of emergency has been dissolved for months.
No, it's for pandemic designation. We're still in the pandemic, so we're still
It's been designated.
designated as such.
And even if you go to policy BEDH, which talks about the public at meetings, the first statement, Mr. Lomanak says the board suspends the public participation and attendance at school board meetings until COVID-19 pandemic concludes. That's the statement in there. So it actually speaks to the pandemic designation.
Okay, well, I do want to make a couple things pretty clear. The state does not designate a pandemic. They issue states of emergency. The state, Governor McMaster doesn't designate something a pandemic. That's what scientists do, that's what medical professionals do. So this policy, to me, doesn't read correctly at all. But if what we're saying is, long as COVID-19 exists, this is our policy, then I think we need to be open about that. But I don't think at all that when this policy was enacted, people were thinking anything other than the state of emergency as issued either by the president or the governor, since the governor does not designate a pandemic.
I don't think that's what it's saying when it's saying the state. I think the state is talking about the place of being. That if you read that again, Mr. Lomanak?
Board members may call in during open session meetings during pandemic designations by the state and/or the United States. At such times, meetings may be conducted via audio or live streamed for the public.
Okay. So we are actually still in the pandemic. It's not over. So even though the governor has not issued a state of emergency, we are still in the pandemic. The pandemic is not over. And I think that's why when in March, when we did the public participation, it clearly states at the first line in BEDH that public participation and attendance at school board meetings is suspended until the COVID-19 pandemic concludes. And that was, it was written because we didn't know what we were dealing with. We still don't know what we're dealing with because every variant is very different. But I think that what we've asked the superintendent to do is to monitor. And when we get to a point where it's safe to open back up for in-person, then we would do that. So I think that the thing of it is that we've just been being very cautious and careful in opening in person, because we're definitely not violating the open meeting law, because the meetings are being conducted in the open. But as for the in-person portion of it, we do have policies in place that support the meetings not being in person right now because we're still in the COVID-19 pandemic. Any other questions on policies?
I do.
Commissioner King?
So if you go back on my record, yes, you're right, Ms. Williams. We actually were on, the NASCAR Speedway when we did the policies, for sure. Taking 180 policies at one time on a regular basis, or 50 or 40, for sure, you can go through a whole lot of policies. I want to read one, and I believe I voted no on that one because that's one that you mentioned. But on the board member ethics, which really is a very, very, very loose definition of ethics. Let's see, BCA. Okay. I just want to read one statement refer to that this policy is outlining. So a board member should maintain desirable relations with the superintendent of schools and his or her staff by doing the following. And one of them is that I need to strive to provide adequate safeguards, whatever that means, around the superintendent and other staff members to the end that they can live happily, and comfortably in the community and discharge their educational functions on a thoroughly professional basis. I'm going to leave it at that. The second thing I'll leave it at that. Thank you. That's all I have for policies.
Okay, anyone else on policies?
Actually, Miss Harris, something that Miss Williams, one of those policies. I'm really troubled. I believe that when people come in to talk, or when they're addressing a public employees paid by taxpayers' money, I'm not really sure that, I don't know what prevents them from criticizing employees. Where does that come from? I believe in freedom of speech. Now, of course, I believe in constructive criticism, but what says that the public or anyone cannot criticize a public employee if that employee is not doing his or her job, or for any capacity? We allow praises. We've come up with the arbitrary notion that we shouldn't mention employees' names, but we sure allow the public or anyone to bring an employee's name when if it's for praises, but not criticisms. That's a very one-sided, notion. I don't know that anything prevents anyone, no laws prevent anyone from criticizing public employees.
Well, if I may, that is one of the policies that was approved, and certainly if you are, making criticisms, accusations against individuals, and it's found not to be true, there would be legal ramifications that we certainly don't need to have and would not like to have. And I think that if there are individuals where someone needs to speak to the superintendent, to the school board, needs to be addressed by the administration, that it's an appropriate way to do that without just coming to a school board meeting, for example, and talking about someone that could be true or may not be true at all.
Okay, Ms. King, does that answer your question?
It doesn't
Okay.
really, but
Okay.
I heard what Ms. Williams said.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Williams, for your response. Dr. Commissioner Bishop, and then we'll let
Madam
Dr.
Chair,
Witherspoon continue with his report.
Madam Chair, it was a lot said. I just want to make sure I'm clear about something. At the last meeting, it was stated that there was a law being broken up. We was illegally doing something against one particular law. So can I go back to Attorney Williams? There is no open meeting law. Is that we're clear about?
We have open meetings, and it's addressed.
Okay.
It is addressed, but we are allowed to have meetings, to stream those meetings where the public can hear them, which makes it open. And the public can respond to what we're doing in those meetings.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I heard that clear. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner King, right quick.
So really, to come to a conclusion, I'd like to know, and thousands of constituents want to know when we are going to open back up to in-person. For a lot of people, the definition of an open meeting is the ability to attend in person. So when is that going to happen? We've got to give a timeline or some indication of, when we allowed our kids to go back to school, we decided that there would need to be a rate of I can't remember the term, but a rate of infection below a certain level. I mean, what are the guidelines for the public to know when we're going to open back up? I mean, we've always conducted our meetings with our people here. So what are we looking at?
I think Commissioner King, I think Dr. Witherspoon is getting to that. That's why I asked y'all where y'all done with the policy. So we can move on. He's got several layers here for us, but I think he's getting to that. That's why we're just doing it in segments, because he's got about 2 or 3 probably other people that's got to speak tonight. Are we good on policies as Dr. Witherspoon moves to the next part of the report? Because I think he is going to speak to that.
Okay, but that's policy. We changed that policy to close the in-person. That's why this refers to policy.
Correct.
Right? So that was my question.
Right, but if you recall, I think it was you that requested the information. Mr. Devine made the motion for Attorney Williams to do what she's doing tonight, and that's report back to us, as Mr. Bishop just said. We wanted to make sure we wasn't violating the open meeting law, and we've learned that we're not violating the open meeting law. So now it's time to go, because what we asked the superintendent to do for us was to have the attorney look at the legal stuff and then come back to us on what next steps. So let's let the superintendent finish his report, because he may have some next steps for us. All right, Dr. Witherspoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, based on what you all had requested from the last meeting, we certainly wanted Attorney Williams to address that. You've also asked that the administration take a look, given the health situation, as well as some safety concerns as well. That being said, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm certainly here this evening, certainly recommend perhaps even at the next meeting, we go ahead and we allow public to attend with certain safety and security protocols in place. One being with limited seating, masks and so forth, and we will outline those procedures. Certainly, as we conclude this meeting this evening, and have that for the public to see as well. But as we've, again, looked at policies, procedures, and I would say from a safety standpoint, just given the national and statewide and even local tenor at some meetings, I think it's very prudent that we have certain, as we have said in previous meetings and safety and so forth, certain seen and sometimes unseen protocols in place to allow for safety and security of this board and staff and those that would be in attendance. So that is certainly, some preliminary assessment and what I would put forth this evening, Madam Chair.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I do, Madam Chair.
Okay,
So-
Commissioner King?
Music to my ears, Dr. Witherspoon, thank you very much. But that also probably means that the board needs to take action to change the policy to open. So is there a recommendation by the administration?
No.
So that's the
That would need to
recommendation.
come from the board. It doesn't necessarily be a
Yeah, I think
recommendation
Mr.
from
Devine was just about to do it.
All right, let's go.
Madam Chair, I'm make a motion that we have in-person meetings at the next board meeting with all the safety protocols as outlined by the superintendent in his superintendent report as he reported tonight, along with reserving the right to close if we notice the numbers begin to increase.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to undo
We'll have in-person meetings.
to have in-person meetings, starting at the next board meeting, with the safety protocols that have been put in place by the superintendent, outlined by the superintendent. But it comes with us reserving the right to go back to close but open to the public meetings in the event that our numbers of COVID go back up. And it's been properly seconded by Commissioner Bishop. We will now open the floor for any questions or comments before we take a vote.
May-
Commissioner Devine.
Madam Chair, may I also, we also will need a policy brought forth, Dr. Witherspoon and Ms. Williams, to reflect school board meetings, policy BE, because we did do a modification back in March of 2020. Now we need to come back with another policy for policy BE as it pertains to school board meetings. And Madam Chair, if you can work with staff to get us that policy. I think School Boards Association has a model policy that reflects what we're talking about going forward.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor. It's been properly second. Are there any other questions or comments before we take the vote? Okay, and we will take it manual. Yes, Ms. Myers?
Excuse me, Chair, can you please repeat the motion before I take my vote?
Mr. Devine, will you restate your motion?
Motion is to open in person at the next board meeting, which is the fourth Tuesday in February, with the safety protocols that the superintendent has outlined in his superintendent's report, and also reserve the right to close in person if we notice the numbers begin to increase.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's been properly second. Okay, this ends all conversation and discussion on this motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. The vote is unanimous to reopen for in-person meetings with the outlined safety protocols as given by the superintendent at our next meeting. Let me also note that we need to also look back at BEDH, which is a 321 policy as well, Attorney Williams, where we mentioned to suspend the public participation. We need to make sure that that policy now reflects the decisions of the board on tonight. Okay?
And bring that forth, because we're going to have
And,
to vote
yeah,
on that
we can
one.
have those policies brought forth at the next meeting just to take the official vote to change the policies, if that's okay with everyone. Commissioner King?
Madam Chair, Dr. Witherspoon, once you've figured out the protocols that you want to put in place, maybe restriction of attendance, the distance, et cetera, how fast can you put that on the website or a place where the public will know exactly and we can maybe disseminate that information as well to our constituents?
Absolutely. We will make every attempt to, by the end of this week or certainly first of next week.
Okay, very well, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions on this? Commissioner Devine?
While you're bringing policy BE forward and BEDH forward, we also need to look at, and I guess this would be part of the administration's look at the board meeting locations
Oh,
as well. So we'll probably have to do another revised board meeting location as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so
So
much.
those were the
Mr.
three, I remember, those were the three items that we changed, the two policies, then the location.
Okay. All right, Dr. Witherspoon, you want to finish up the rest of your report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and is Mr. Henry? If you would, please, maybe just a brief update with regard to Lower Richland. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Board Commissioners, Dr. Witherspoon. I'd be glad to provide an update. Since our last meeting, we continue to operate on portable generation at the two buildings in question, buildings H and J. We have since received information from the electrical and architectural consultants, so we are formulating a permanent repair for the underground issues. Also, last week, we had a meeting on site with Dominion Energy. Normally, Dominion delivers power to a certain point, and then it's the customer's responsibility. However, in this case, Dominion has given us another option. They have agreed to actually set several additional power poles on our site in the courtyard so that they can extend power from their transformer over to these two buildings. So what that will do is allow us, once that has been installed, allow us to eliminate the generator. So that has been agreed to. Dominion actually started that work today. So we hope by tomorrow or the next day that we'll be able to get off the portable generation, and then we would be facilitating the permanent repair at that point.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if there are questions or
Okay.
comments
Any questions or comments from anyone on the
that
board?
piece. Yeah.
Commissioner King?
Mr. Henry, at the last board meeting, so you indicated that the portable generator cost about $7,500 just for the generator, and then Ms. Harris, she knows her stuff. She said, well, wait a minute, the diesel is extra, right? So overall, that was a cost of about 10 grand a week. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that was supposed to be a temporary fix. But I believe that last Friday, we had a failure. So did the portable generator fail?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that wasn't supposed to happen.
You are correct.
So did we pay for that?
We
Do we
don't.
still pay for a generator that's cost us 10 grand? The kids can't be in school. We have to turn around, all of that brouhaha, et cetera. Why did it fail? I mean, that's supposed to be a backup. Why did the backup fail?
There was a mechanical failure within the generator itself.
Oh, well, great.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, I'm assuming that we can negotiate some stuff there, right?
That is a correct
Okay.
assumption.
Okay, that's good. You said that Dominion is sort of going to step in, and is this going to be a permanent solution?
No, ma'am. What they're going to do is temporarily set several electrical poles inside our property into the courtyard, which would allow them to feed those buildings overhead, which would allow us then to remove the portable generator, which is feeding those two buildings at this point.
My understanding, and, is limited. You indicated that the original problem was in the conduit, essentially, of wherever Dominion is to those two buildings, H and J, right? And that after further review, there was some water damage and so some of the stuff, and several circuits were, so it was pretty extensive, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So the fix is not going to be actually fixing that particular line, is that right?
It will be, yes, ma'am. What this does is allow us to continue to operate, and we'll be able to implement the recommendations, which would replace, repair, modify the feeders that belong to us, which comes from the Dominion Energy transformer into those two buildings.
Okay,
If that makes sense.
Is there a split cost between us and Dominion? Is there some cost that they can endorse?
These lines belong to Richland 1.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
And just for clarification, Mr. Henry, I think this is important that Ms. King know this. The poles being put in is to get us off the generator. The work that needs to be done cannot be done while our children are in school. I think that's the piece we need to make sure the board knows. So we have to put something in place, right, Dr. Witherspoon, to get the lines off the ground. And Dominion has agreed to put them in the air to feed power to the two buildings. It's not the whole school as it's been put out here. It's not the whole school. It's two buildings at the school. Because we're dealing with power lines that's submerged underwater. That equals electrocution. So we can't fix that. I'm quite sure they would probably have to take that whole school coal for them to start cutting and moving wires or whatever that may need to be done. So the repairs that need to happen cannot happen while school's in session, pretty much.
We can probably do some preliminary work.
But the real stuff.
But the removal of things that are energized would require that we have Dominion cut the power.
Okay, which means the children can't be at school.
That is correct.
Just wanted to simplify it for my colleagues. I know more about power lines right now and transformers and fuses than the law allows. I've gotten a full class, just so that everybody kind of understand exactly what it is that we're dealing with. Because I think to a lot of people, when it comes to power lines, you think, okay, let me call Dominion. They come out and flip, click, bam. But it's lines that we have on campus that needs to be pretty much taken care of. Correct. Okay. One question that I had, and I've shared this with the superintendent, I want to share this with my colleagues. One of the concerns I have is the fact that water is standing on that campus. My concern, and I've shared this with county, is the possibility that some stormwater drainage systems in that area has been rerouted. We know that Rabbit Run is a flood zone, okay? And they're in the process of building a whole lot of houses there, so it's a lot of dirt coming in. I've seen with my own two eyes over the past 5-6 weeks, major repair being done to stormwater ditches and so forth that are all around that high school campus. And at Chairperson County, I'm not pointing a finger at anyone, but it does raise a concern for me because there is a portion of that campus that is on a creek, and that creek needs to drain. And if we all remember when we installed the field there was a portion of the field that holds water. Anyone that's ever played on Lower Richland Field prior to the new field, there's a part by the 40-yard line on the visitor side that held water, and I believe we had to put a very sophisticated system in, Dr. Witherspoon, to drain that. My concern is not just the fix. I want it fixed. I want it fixed safely. My concern as a board member is what may have happened in that area within, and I'm not even going to say a 1/4 of a mile radius because it's like right there on the campus. There are 3 areas that I'm seeing some major rerouting, new rocks, new pipes, but did you block a flow of something that might have been flowing off of the Lower Richland campus? I think, and Dr. Witherspoon, I would ask that someone have them look into, and I've talked to Jill Price and several others over there, look into what's causing the issue. That's my concern, because the day it may be H&J, next week it could be MS and K. You know, if water is allowed to sit there, for water to be sitting at the campus and not flowing, that's a concern for me underground, above ground, wherever. So I would ask that you please look into that as well, and have the county look into that, because they've shared even some sentiments as well, that there's been a lot of work being done in that area. We had a 1,000-year flood. If we were gonna drown the power lines, we would have drowned it that day, because the neighborhoods right there were completely flooded. So for us to have a issue now, I think it's a little bit more going on than the eyes can see from looking at the soil, and I think we just need to start looking at what was put in place, there's a lot of new stuff being put in place around that school that may be blocking something that the district put in place to get the water off the campus. So I just want to share that with you for what it's worth, and you can definitely keep the superintendent informed on any findings that the county may have. Any other questions on this? Okay, Dr. Withers. Okay, Commissioner Clyburn.
I just have one question. So as far as the temporary fix, Dominion Energy and, your staff, are y'all pretty confident that this fix is going to be sufficient? And, it sounds pretty extensive, so I'm guessing yes, but are you pretty confident that this is going to be a sufficient enough fix for there not to be any other issues? Temporary, yeah.
We're talking about the permanent fix?
Well, the temporary fix.
Right now. Temporary.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to ask that question.
But that temporary can be in place as long as we need it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
There is an expiration on the agreement, but we surely won't go out that far.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. We'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Myers.
Sorry, I just thought about it. Is there a price to that temporary fix?
Ah,
I'm sorry, I just thought about it.
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
It's more than the $10,000?
We,
Oh, go on. Never mind.
We good?
Did I answer the question? Yes, ma'am.
no, I really want to know the price.
The price actually offset the cost of the generator over the next few weeks. So it was actually a break even. It's really a good situation for us, because it takes the risk of the generator going down again. So it gives us more reliable temporary power. So it's a good thing.
Thank you, that answered the question.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Wisborne, if we find that somebody on the outside caused that problem, we would pursue that.
We would follow up on that as well.
Appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right, you can continue with your report.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. The next registration period for our pre-kindergarten programs for the 2022-2023 school year will begin on Monday, February 14th, and run through March 25th. And there will be a final registration period from April 25th through June 3rd. Space is limited, so parents are encouraged to register their children as soon as possible. For more information about our pre-K programs and the registration process, go to www.richland1.org/4K, or you may call 803-799-9494. There are several national and statewide observances during the school year that recognize various employee groups for their contributions to public education. This week, February 7th through 11th, is National School Counseling Week, and next week, February 14th through 18th, is School Bus Driver Appreciation Week in South Carolina. Please join me in saluting and thanking our school counselors and our bus drivers for the vital roles they play and the many contributions they make in supporting the success of our students. Congratulations. Next Tuesday, February 15th, I will give my annual State of the District address at Eau Claire High School. Due to COVID-19 safety precautions, in-person attendance will be limited, but the event will be live streamed on our website beginning at 6 p.m. And I want to, again, look forward to sharing what has happened, certainly in our district over the past 12 months. But I'll segue into our cognitive visit that we had last week, where our district and districts goes through this accreditation process at least every 5 years, but because of COVID, it was a little longer time period. So in this year's address, not only sharing what has occurred in the district, certainly within the last 12 months, if you will, and then looking forward, we'll still do that. But because of the cognitive visit and what we've put together and submitted, I will certainly incorporate in this year's address some of the cumulative successes and impact of what we do in Richland 1, and how that is some of the cumulative impact that, again, outcomes for students and opportunities that they have had, and what that has meant for our community. Now, with regard to our cognitive visit itself, I want to certainly thank Dr. Miner. She came in a few months ago, and as she was transitioning in, one of the first conversations we had is, okay, we're getting ready for our review, and this is yours. And she did a yeoman's job, but and I certainly want to thank her, and I want to give kudos to our staff, everyone up and down the organization that worked that we had our data and information, but in those presentations it's done a certain way, and all of that. So kudos to the staff, certainly here, and even going down to our staff, teachers, principals, administrators, even students. The team even talked to students, about 230 individuals, all said and done, stakeholders from the board, again, to families, parents, teachers, community, and I'll be sharing one story, letter that one of our students wrote to the team. I'll be sharing that next week as well, just sharing what their particular school means to them. But I do want to thank everyone that participated, to our, again, in the district, our parents and community partners and folks that are certainly part of the Richland 1 family. The district did, we get a preliminary report, and we did show very well in comments included our efforts to plan for student success. And while success may look different or be defined differently by different students, the pathways, the options, the opportunities, and I think the team, Commissioner Devine, they heard that throughout the day, not just from you all, but again, all the way up and down the organization and into our community as well. And that is something that the feedback that we get, that our students are appreciative of, our families are appreciative of, and that's one of the many strengths of Richland 1, that we are able, we plan and we put in place things and opportunities that lead to our students' success. And again, we'll be sharing a lot of that information at the State of the District. So again, I want to thank each and every one of you that participated in one of those interviews, or certainly submitted information relative to your respective departments. They reviewed, and spoke to our processes and procedures that we have in place as something to be recognized, and even they looked at school information and so forth. So we appreciate the going through that. And it does, when you have these accreditation reviews, it gives the organization an opportunity not only to show and demonstrate or to prove, yes, we do the things we say we're doing, but it also gives an organization an opportunity to be reflective, not only in the journey here to get to this point, but they also ask as a part of that process, what'd you do since the last review? And how do you get to that point? And you have to demonstrate those things as well. And it is all based, again, I think Chairwoman Harris, you said it in some earlier comments, it's about that continuous improvement. It is about how you grow and strengthen an organization collectively and systemically and systematically. And reflecting on that and making sure what we do on a day-to-day basis leads to that that path of continuous improvement. So, again, thanks and kudos to all that took part in this process as well. And our path to continuous improvement continues every day. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Witherspoon, for your report. Are there any questions or comments for Dr. Witherspoon as he spoke lastly about the cognitive visit and accreditation? Any questions or comments?
Not about that, but something else.
Same thing, Madam Chair. I have
Okay.
something that just triggered that I want to go back and ask about. So,
All right, Commissioner King and then Commissioner Bishop.
Yes, Dr. Witherspoon, again, coming back to constituents' request, I have a lot of constituents that are asking what the plan is and what the steps are to get us closer to making wearing masks optional for children in schools.
Well, we're still monitoring, again, CDC and DHEC recommendations, as I've shared with the board and certainly our community. As those tweaks and changes occur, we cascade that information out. We have not received any information from the health officials about any change in recommendations or anything at that point, but that is something we would certainly need to have before we would be comfortable bringing any change or any recommendation to the board with that regard. But we are monitoring and we are taking a look at those things.
Okay, and obviously that demand stems from the dramatic decrease in infection rates, et cetera, the push by a number of states to also lift those. And also, we talk about doing what's right for children, and it's not an either or, it's a both and, right? We're trying to push the limits of what we can do and do it safely and preserve also freedom and just comfort. It is true that especially for young children, it's very, very difficult, and as they are, as I was saying, as they are developing their speech, et cetera, we're starting to see some evidence that wearing masks on a continual basis throughout the day is really detrimental to children.
Commissioner Bishop.
Madam Chair, thank you. As we just took a 7-0 vote about in-person meeting, and as Dr. Witherspoon mentioned, the state of the district is not in person. It made me trigger in my mind to ask, what about committee meetings? Are those going to be in person before we come back in person for in-person meeting, or would it be after that? That's something I just wanted to make sure we was clear about with that vote.
Okay.
Is that going to be considered?
The committee would be after the meeting.
Yeah, so would that be in person?
Well, one of the things that I was going to mention in the announcements at the end was for us to start reconsidering the reopening of even the chat with the chair,
Yeah.
but to allow Eva an opportunity to kind of regulate all of that, because that is a switch that we've now got to make. So I'm thinking that once we get past the February 22nd meeting,
Correct.
we will move forward with moving committees back to in person as much as possible. And the reason why I want us to be careful with that, because that
Exactly.
normally happens at SAB.
That's what I'm about to ask
And
next.
SAB is not a very big room.
Okay.
So I think we just need to get together on that with the superintendent, and
Yeah.
and we'll work through committees. But we do know that we're able to reopen for chat with the chair. But we'll work through the committee piece, even if we've got to move committee, and
Yeah.
some of Doc folk be dialed in or whatever. We'll work through that.
That was
So
gonna
y'all
be
just
my-
allow us to the end of the month. the
That was
22nd.
going to be my second question, Madam Chair, so thank you for entertaining that part as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Witherspoon? Commissioner Clyburn?
So my comment is regarding mask removal or removing the mask mandate. Our numbers may be decreasing in some areas as far as deaths and infection rates. But my concern is the safety of the children and our teachers. This virus is not over, and the proximity that we have with our students and teachers communicating with each other, I just feel that there could come a level of just a level of complacency when it comes to how we interact with each other. It's hard to, keep socially distancing when everything seems normal. I think when you have the mask, and I'm sorry, I don't see any reports. I didn't hear any reports where something is damaging to the children's psyche. I have two children, 10 and 6 years old. I haven't noticed any trauma. They like putting on their mask in the morning. And I don't think, I know some parents are traumatized by seeing their children in masks. That's, the feeling that I get. But my children don't cry about their masks. They don't stump their feet, with a tantrum. They put their masks on because they know it's a pandemic out here. And they feel safer with their masks. And I'm watching the students, their friends, getting out of cars every morning because I'm in the car line. They have their mask on, and I don't see them stomping and fussing and complaining about putting masks on. So, and the speech thing, that's a new one on me. I have not heard of any speech impediments from children, from licensed, respectable medical professionals. That's a new one on me. I haven't heard that. So I just wanted to voice my concern on that, but thank you.
All right, Commissioner Clyburn, or Commissioner Myers?
I don't want to spend a whole hour on the same topic because I believe we did this at the last board meeting, but I just want to state, just make sure we put the right procedures in place when we are trying to talk about these masks and face-to-face, because it opened up doors to other things, parents in the classroom, field trips, pet rallies, cut the numbers off the games. I'm just saying, so let's just put the right procedures in place before we actually open up doors. And that's it. I don't say nothing else.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Devine?
I too, as my colleagues have said, don't want to continue down this road of the COVID numbers. If you look at the numbers, I think the numbers are about 5 times higher than they were last year at this same time. And according to the rules, I think we should be closed as a school system, but we're trying our best to keep our schools open. And it's been proven time and time again that mask has helped mitigate some of the risk of opening in person, along with some other protocols that we have in place. So I would encourage staff to continue to monitor that, look at the numbers, and just see where we are. Saw a recent report that about 60 to 70% of large school districts across this country are still masked up. 60 to 70% of large school districts across this country are still masked up. and that applies here to Richland 1 as well. We want to make sure that we protect all of our students, and there's an option for students who may need some type of relief due to medical, Dr. Wilson can speak more than this, that if they need some type of accommodation, they need to approach their principal or appropriate staff to make that happen. And I'm sure that we have worked with those families as well, and we will continue to work with those families as well. But I would ask us to please, I have 3 children in our school system, have not talked with their friends, have not had a problem, talked with a couple parents just this past week, and they're glad and thankful that we have had masks in our district. And most of the students, are wearing the mask as asked by us along with their parents. And so I would ask us to please monitor that, and we make that any type of changes to bring that to us at the appropriate time. Thank you, Chairman Harris.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Devine. When I visited Harrell Hill the other day, and I shared this with Dr. Witherspoon, some of you might have saw my post. I had one of the most amazing conversations with a room full of first graders who were all masked up. And one little guy came up to me and he said, "Ms. Harris, my mom and my dad are doctors. My teacher is a doctor. All of my classmates are doctors. You're even a doctor." And I looked at the kid. First graders can say some of the darndest things, Bishop. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We all got our masks on." And it's like, I like your mask, Ms. Harris. I had some sparkly stuff on there. And it was just really interesting. And I heard, Dr. Woods, when you said something, you said, look at the mindset of the child, that, he affiliated the mask with the medical profession. And it led to a much longer conversation. If you've ever walked the halls, Dr. Prince, from the farthest corner of Harrell Hill to the cafeteria, that's a mile-long stretch. That was a very in-depth conversation, Eunice, with me and 21 first graders about masks. But not one time did they say they didn't like the mask. They liked the mask. They were complimenting each other's masks. So, Dr. Wisdom, the board has asked you on tonight to come back with information on whether we were breaking laws with the open meeting, and we asked for next steps. And you gave us the next step and said at this time, and I know you've done this very prayerfully and carefully in saying, yes, we can reopen for in-person meetings. But I know in the back of your mind, still yet the concern is your staff and your students. And I think that before we jump to a next step, let's make sure this step is safe, because we made sure that the vote we took said with the numbers staying where they are. Now, we do know when we start mingling again, numbers have the potential of going up. So I think we need to be very careful and take our time in this, because sometimes, folk are coming, I wanted this, I wanted that, I want the third. I got parents saying to me, that's apparently on the meeting, saying, no, please don't get rid of the mask. Please, I feel safe with my child having on a mask. So, Dr. Witherspoon, I implore you, as always, in this board, to make decisions that's in the best interest and the safety of all children that we serve here in Richland School District 1. A few announcements I need to make before we close. To my colleagues, please mark March 26th on your calendar for a board retreat. The location has not been determined as of yet. If you have any topics, please submit those to our executive assistant. Those topics are very limited because of the activities that we will be engaged in on that day as we work our strategic plan and discussions, et cetera. Some things we've asked Dr. Witherspoon to do for us to bring to the board and be prepared to work in this session. So please, please, please save March 26th. Also continue to keep in your thoughts and prayers. I did get a text message just now from my little cousin. Well, she's not my little cousin because she's my older cousin, Jacinda McDuffie, wanting to thank Richland 1 for their presence today at the homegoing services for Judge Mildred Weathers McDuffie. So she wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It meant so much to her. And then another announcement, want to wish a very happy birthday, and I hope I didn't miss any January birthdays amongst the board.
Yes, you did.
Your birthday was January, Ms. King? Okay, so we will have to celebrate Ms. King as well next week. We want to wish Aaron Bishop a very happy birthday, February 13th. Dr. Witherspoon, February 21st. And to Jamie Devine, who will be celebrating at the next board meeting, February 22nd. And of course, our colleague Beatrice King, January
30th.
3rd, okay, January 30th. So we certainly want to wish all of our colleagues very happy birthday. We plan on celebrating you at the next meeting, so be prepared to be a little surprised. I promise you it won't cost so much that you got to file it on your ethics report. It will be something just to show a little love to you, how much you are appreciated for what you do here in Richland 1. Last announcement, guys, 12/1, before adjournment is the next meeting. The regular scheduled board meeting of the Board of Commissioners will be Tuesday, February 22nd, and will be held here again at Dreher High School. If you recall, we had to forego the meeting before because of a performance that was here, but to get us back on schedule, we will be returning back to Dreher. So guys, y'all can leave everything in place if you wanna. We'll be back here at 3319 Millwood Avenue here in Columbia. If there's no objection from the board, you can consider yourselves dismissed. Have a safe and wonderful evening. Good night.